Hi, I'm Mac Rudinick, lead developer at RackForms. In this video, we're going to be talking about upgrading our version of RackForms. So there are two main components to this process. The first is a zip file, which contains the build of RackForms you want to update to. So in this case, I just went to the download site and I downloaded the latest version. We get a little zip called rackforms.zip. And the second then is a connection to our existing RackForms installation. Now, there are two main ways that this is probably going to happen. The first is you're going to have a local file system installation. This is what I actually have here. So I just go to my htdocs folder and a folder called RackForms, and here's my RackForms install. Or the alternative is you probably have it on a live web server. If that's the case, instead of using a Finder window like I have right here, you would be using an FTP program or cPanel. So the steps that we're going to take are going to be the exact same. It's just that your process may vary slightly based on how you access the files. But as long as you have access to your existing RackForms files, that's the key. So let's get started. So let's update our local version of RackForms here. I should say our version of RackForms. So the first step then is to take our newly downloaded version right here and just unzip it to our local desktop. So with this particular program, that means I kind of double click on it and then drag it to my desktop. So here then is a folder called RackForms. Again, this is on my desktop here. And now what we want to do is we want to overwrite 3 files from our existing installation to our new installation. So those 3 files are, I should say 3 files and folders. The first is RackForms output. And all I want to do is I just want to overwrite the new version. So take RackForms output and overwrite the new version. And again, here I'm using my local file system. If this was FTP, we would use an FTP command, for example, to grab the output folder and save it to our desktop. The second file that we want to grab is in RackForms app, and it's called config.php. So I'll go to app in both of these instances, so RackForms app, and then I'll just take the config.php from here, and I'll overwrite this version from our new unzipped file. And I'll just replace that. Finally, I'm going to go to RackForms app move files and grab the config.php file from there. So at RackForms app move files, RackForms app move files, overwrite the file. At this point now, this new version of RackForms is one step away from being complete. Generally speaking, what we'll want to do is we'll want to take the install.php file right here and we'll want to rename it to install.php.old, for example, right? So we don't want the install file to kind of interfere with our updating of the new version. With that then, now it's just a matter of taking this new copy of RackForms right here and getting it onto and replacing our existing version. Now, once again, because I'm on a file system, for me, this would be as simple as doing this. I would take my existing RackForms folder, and I would call it, for example, rackforms.old, and I would just take this new folder and just move it right there, right? So now I have a new version of RackForms. Now, the reason why we do this rackforms-old is it's always good to keep a backup, right? We could just say, well, delete this existing file, but that's probably bad for, well, it's bad for a lot of reasons, right? Don't get rid of things until you know it's absolutely okay to do so. And in fact, I would actually take this version right here. I would zip this up and I would actually store that somewhere safe, right? Because it's always nice to have a good backup. That's, of course, because I'm a local file system. If, however, we were on a web server, we would do something along the lines of getting rid of this zip file right here, rezipping this guy, right? We'd compress this down, FTPing it up to our server, right? So then we'd have 2 files. We'd have a file called rackforms.zip and then a folder called RackForms. We would then take our existing RackForms folder and once again rename it to something like rackforms-old, right? And then we would uncompress the rackforms.zip file. On our server then, same as you may recall when you first installed RackForms, we would now have a folder called, once again, RackForms. And because we now have all of our output files and our config files, all we have to do is just point our web browser to our existing location and everything just works. Once again, though, the key here is we're not deleting the old RackForms folder just yet, right? Keep it around, make a zip copy of it, store it on a safe location. That way you always have a backup of your existing file structures. So with that, we've updated RackForms. Of course, if you have any questions about this process in any way, shape, or form, please let us know. info@rackforms.com, and thanks for your time.